Renting versus buying, a classic debate. But what's actually the smarter financial choice? I've experienced both sides. 8 years renting, 5 years owning, and I've learned it's not a simple apples to apples comparison. With renting, it means paying your landlord every month. But with buying, you're handling the mortgage, interest, the maintenance, the insurance, it just all adds up. And the big reason for making this video is that most of the advice out there or the videos on YouTube don't fully consider the reality here in Canada, or don't factor in the opportunity costs of renting versus buying correctly. They talk about first-time homebuyers moving straight into detached houses, but with today's prices, most of you are looking at condos or townhomes instead. You're renting a basement suite or a condo or even a coach house, and you're curious if it really does make sense to buy. And that's exactly what I'll be diving into in this video, breaking down the total costs of renting, the total costs of owning, and making it simple to understand. But a quick favor before we move on, if you're new here, my channel is all about real estate, focusing on educating and empowering people such as yourself. After watching this video, if you find it helpful, hit the thumbs up. And if you want to support the time and effort I put into making these videos, don't forget to subscribe. The concept of this video is to figure out both the unrecoverable costs of renting and owning. Simply, it's how much money are you putting towards either option and never seeing again. Because in theory, if renting is costing you more money than owning, then you may want to consider buying a home. Or maybe it's the opposite, where renting actually saves you more money. And that's what we're going to figure out today. First part of this video will be a quick overview of how I got to the 5.94% rule, where if you're wanting a simplified way just to analyze whether renting versus owning makes more sense, you can do that. Then the second part, I'll break down more of the critical information you need to know. That way you can leave knowing all the information you need to make the best decision. So if that's you, stick around. The comparison I'm going to be making is between renting a 2-bedroom, 1-bath condo versus buying that exact 2-bedroom, 1-bath condo, which at today's prices is going to cost around $500,000. So with renting, it's pretty straightforward. It's literally just how much you're paying each month to your landlord, times that by 12, and that's going to be the total unrecoverable cost for the year that's associated to renting. As for how much it's going to cost you to rent that 2-bedroom, 1-bath condo, it's going to be $2,000 a month. Times that by 12 is going to be $24,000 a year. And that's going to be your total unrecoverable cost. Then we have cost of home ownership. And the 5 biggest unrecoverable costs is property taxes, maintenance, closing, insurance, and then mortgage payments, which is comprised of both interest and principal. So the first one is property taxes. And what are property taxes exactly? Well, they're payments once a year you make to the local government or municipality to cover roadways, schools, police, all that stuff that keeps the city running. And how much is that going to be exactly? Well, the average property taxes for a condo is going to be about 0.35% of the total value. So in our situation, $500,000 translates into $1,750 for the year in property taxes. And then we have maintenance costs, and the recommendation is about 1% of the home value for annual maintenance costs. Though since pretty much every condo that I know of has strata fees, which the owner is required to pay, we'll be using the average, which is $375 per month. And these strata fees cover all of the costs associated to running this building and just making sure that it stays in good shape. And then we have home insurance, which varies just depending on what you are wanting, but a good annual average is $600 a year. And plus the strata fee is also going to have insurance that you are going to have to pay with your strata fees. So it's just good to figure out what they have and then get your own insurance accordingly. Next is closing costs, which you are going to pay when purchasing a property. And it's something I wanted to mention, but I won't be putting it into the overall calculation because it's really just a one-time fee. But just so you're aware, a typical closing cost includes legal fees, which are about $1,500. And then you have property transfer tax, which has a specific calculation to figure that exact amount out, which in our case would be $8,000 on the $500,000 home. Though with first-time homebuyer grants and other government programs, you can be partially or even fully exempt from having to pay this total amount. And then we have the mortgage payment, which is the purchase price minus the deposit or down payment, which is typically 5%. And that's going to equal your total loan amount that's needed. And then when you factor in the interest rates, which are around 4.6% and a 25-year amortization, that's going to give us our monthly payment. So in our scenario, your down payment would be $25,000, which is 5%, leaving you with a $475,000 mortgage that's needed. And then at 4.6 and 25-year amortization, it's going to be $2,656 or so a month. Last thing we need to figure out is the opportunity cost. Because when you're buying a home, you're using the money that you have as a down payment to buy the home. Whereas if you're renting, you have that same money that can be used for an investment and you can get an annual return on it. Where when compared to owning, you have year-over-year appreciation. Simply put, it's just your home increases in value a certain percentage every year. And so when figuring out the average investment returns, the S&P 500 is usually the golden standard, which has received an annual return average of 10% over the last 20 years. When it comes to real estate in Canada, this has averaged about 1.8% over the last 40 years. So I understand you may be thinking, well, 10% investment return is significantly better than the 1.8% real estate return. Thereby, investing in stocks is just a no-brainer. And you're not the only one that would think this. Though when you break down the actual returns that both investing in a stock or the real estate brings in, you'll be surprised that stocks don't always give you the best return. So if you were to use that $25,000 and put it in the S&P 500 at 10%, you'll make about $2,500 a year. Though when you put the same $25,000 as a down payment towards the $500,000 condo, where the 1.8% annual real estate return is not factored on the $25,000, but rather the total value of your home. And that translates into $9,000 a year earned. The big difference though, you don't actually receive this money as you would in an investment portfolio. It's equity that's just being built year over year. As you can see, buying real estate acts as a huge lever. You can literally have a little bit of money put towards a property and it can be leveraged to acquire some pretty good returns on equity. Now that we've broken down everything, let's just figure out the total cost between renting and owning. Renting, we had a total of $24,000 of unrecoverable costs. Though when you factor in your investment is making you $2,500 a year, that would bring your actual unrecoverable cost to $21,500 a year, which is $1,792 a month. And then with owning, the annual costs were $1,750 for property taxes, $4,500 for strata fees, $31,872 for mortgage payments, and then $600 for insurance. That brings your total unrecoverable cost to $38,722 a year. Though when you factor in the $9,000 a year in a real estate appreciation, it brings your total down to $29,722 a year, which is $2,477 a month. And expressed in a percentage, that would be 5.94% of the home value. So if you're wanting an easy way just to see if owning a home is cheaper or just more expensive, just take the value of the condo that you're looking at buying and times that by 5.94%. And this is going to give you an annual cost of home ownership. And then what I want you to do is divide that by 12, and that's going to be your monthly cost to own that condo. And then compare that number to what you are renting, so you know what is the cheaper option based on your situation. So in this scenario, when it comes to renting versus buying, renting is actually going to be cheaper by $685 a month, which is $8,220 a year. With that said, I know what you may be thinking, that I didn't factor the mortgage payment properly because there's interest and principal in that payment, or maybe you can get a higher percentage investment return than the S&P 500, or maybe you just don't invest at all. So over the next couple minutes, as promised, I'm going to walk you through step by step of what you need, the tools that I would use to get you the exact number so you know where you currently stand on the whole renting versus buying comparison. So what I have here is just another spreadsheet, cost of renting versus cost of owning. And I want you to do the same, is literally just grab a pen and paper, draw this exact layout that I have here. And if you need to, just pause this video, write it all down, and we're going to go over how to figure out this exact cost of owning versus cost of renting. First off is the monthly rent that you pay. So whatever you pay, put that number in. But obviously for our example, we have $2,000 a month, which you times that by 12. It's going to be $24,000 a year. And again, figure that out with your numbers, figure out how much you're paying over the year. Then the next thing we have is investment returns. And so if you're investing in something, you're getting more than 10%, great, put that number down there as an annual basis. Or if you're not investing in anything, then just put 0. But in this situation, this person is making $2,500 a year on their investments. And so real simple, we have the rent minus the investments, which is your total unrecoverable costs, which in our case was $21,500 a year and $1,792 per month. And then we have the cost of home ownership, which starting off, we need to figure out property taxes. And the easiest way to do that is just literally log on to realtor.ca, find the condo that you're looking at, click on it, and then in the detailed notes below here, you're going to see the annual property taxes. But for our example, it was $1,750. Then if you scroll down, you'll find the maintenance fees here, which is $375, which is really close to our example. But the key here is that that's the monthly cost. We need to figure out the annual cost. And so all you need to do is times that by 12, which in our example was $4,500 a year. And then when it comes to insurance, again, do your own homework, see what kind of condo insurance you're going to need. But a typical average is around $600 a year. So we'll put that in. Then when it comes to the mortgage payment, we have interest and principal that we need to figure out. So in the calculation, it was just all combined into one. But in reality, that some of that mortgage payment, you're actually paying towards principal, which is the way I look at it, it's just a forced savings account. And so you're actually getting that money back. And so the real number that we need to figure out for the total cost or the total unrecoverable cost is the interest payment. So what you can do is load up a mortgage calculator. I have TD loaded up here. Again, no affiliations, but I've put all the information into there. The $500,000 home, we have a 25% down payment, which is 5%. So all we need is a $475,000 mortgage. We have the 4.6%, 25 years. And if you scroll down in most calculators, it'll give you a breakdown. And this is what we need to figure out. So the first year, the total amount of interest paid is actually $21,000. So let's write this down. $21,400, and we'll just call it $24. And then the principal being $10,440. We'll put that down. And that amount is just paying off the loan that you have with your bank or whoever lender that you're going with. And the biggest takeaway here is that the interest versus the principal, the first year you're paying a lot more in interest, but as you pay down the principal, as you pay off more of your loan, that actually changes quite a bit. And so near the end of your 25-year amortization, you're paying a lot more towards principal versus interest. And so it's a bit of a pro when it comes to renting versus buying, whereas rent consistently goes up over the years because of inflation, because of the amount that they're allowed to increase it. And then whereas your mortgage payment more or less stays the same, but you're paying more towards your principal. So eventually you'll no longer have a mortgage payment. Then we get into the home appreciation here, which is 1.8% of the home value, of the total home value. So in this example, again, we have $500,000 home times 1.8. It's going to be $9,000 a year that this home, in theory, is going to appreciate based on the data that we have, which is 40 years of it appreciating 1.8%. And then comes the fun part where we figure out the total unrecoverable cost. So literally grab your phone. We have property taxes here, which is $1,750. Add that to the maintenance fee, which is $4,500. Add that to the insurance, which is another $6,800. And then we have the insurance. So when it comes to mortgage, all you're going to add is the interest, because that's the amount of money that you're never going to get back, and that's what we're trying to figure out. So plus the $21,424. And then we have the home evaluation, which is the amount of money that the amount of value that your property is going up each year. So we actually got to minus that off of the total unrecoverable cost because you're gaining that money each year. And this is going to equate to $19,274, which if you divide it by 12 here, it's going to be let's call it $1,606 per month that this house is costing you to own. And then when getting into the legal costs, right, you go buy a home, it's going to be about $1,500 in legal fees. And then the property transfer tax, as mentioned in the situation earlier, it's going to be $8,000. But this is something that if you're a first-time home buyer or if you look into the government grants, you can actually be partially exempt or fully exempt from having to pay this full $8,000. Now, before you give me a hard time and say, well, of course, Rich, you're a realtor, you're going to be, pushing that cost of owning is cheaper. And in this situation, it's cheaper by call it $85 a month. So of course you're going to be pushing that. Well, lots of things can change here, and the cost of owning could all of a sudden drastically change where it's no longer cheaper to buy a home and rather renting is the cheaper option, right? If we go down the list here, property taxes, they're continually to increase every year. Maintenance fees or strata fees, they increase every year, right? Insurance, more or less the same. Mortgage, that's a big one. Let's say you go to refinance and your mortgage is now $1,000 more a month, right? That's not factored into this situation. Home appreciation. If you look at people who bought a home, let's say 3-4 years ago, their home has depreciated in value over the last couple of years. And so this $9,000 in home appreciation, well, you're not going to get that. It's actually going to be decreasing. So it's costing you more money. And then when it comes to closing costs, that's pretty standard. But then you factor in, because you're living in a strata, there's special levies. And so let's say the strata doesn't account for repair that's needed. The pool membrane breaks or something happens, and now everybody's on the hook for a $50,000 pool repair, and then your share of that is called $5,000. Well, that's not factored into this cost of owning either. And then you get into cost of renting. Well, maybe you can get a better return on your investment than stated in this scenario, or maybe you're not investing at all. Who knows? The point is, this is just shedding light on all the variables that are that come into owning a home, that come into renting. And so my thoughts on this is that you are the only one that can make the final decision whether renting or home ownership is just the better option. As we all know, everybody just has their opinion on what you should be doing in your life. It can get really confusing because if we did everything based on what is the best financial decision, we would literally live all under the same roof. We'd all be driving Toyota Corollas and never get any of the latest gadgets and really just not spending money on anything. But as we all know, that is just not the case. So what I would do is just weigh the pros, weigh the cons, and yeah, move forward. And as always, if you need assistance, you can shoot me a text at this number right here. I'll get back to you. Or you can use the link in the description to book a call with me, see if I'm able to help, or at least just point you in the right direction. So if that's you, links below. If you're curious on what you can actually afford after running these calculations, I recommend watching this video right here, where I break down how much house you can afford based on your salary. So while you leave a comment, click on this video, I'm gonna go fly some drones.